What is really going on in Tanzania? What is really going on in nchi jirani? Hey, gosh, I have been flooded with requests from many of you on this question. People are asking. People don't understand. Because all along, Kenyans have believed, nchi jirani, they are cowards. Even maandamano, a proper maandamano, they can't manage. But now, they're teaching Kenyans a thing or two. Actually, much more than a thing or two. Hey, and where's Madam Suluhu? President Madam Suluhu. Hold up. Some say in Nairobi, Kenya. Hey, but most of us usually come to this channel to understand, to go deeper, to know exactly what is happening by understanding something deeply. And I can assure you, you will not be disappointed today. Even as we better understand what is going on in Tanzania, we are going to discover some things that are going to blow our minds. For example, the mystery of that name that keeps on appearing. Anybody trying to research what is happening in Tanzania, what is going on, there is a name that keeps on popping up again and again and again. And this name is not even in government. It is the name of former President Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete. Now, how does that fit into all this high wire drama that is definitely going to have an impact on the entire region? Of course, including Kenya. What is it? Karibuni sana to my show today, where you'll find out the answer to that question and much more. Twende kazi. Someone was heard commenting about Tanzania. These people are making a mistake. Why hasn't the government issued a statement? Why hasn't the government come out and warned people? What is happening? Why are they so quiet? Actually, the answer to that question, may not be what you expect. And it is bang in the middle of this drama that is unfolding in Tanzania, which in my opinion is going to expose a lot of rot that has been going on. Actually, is already exposing that rot. Because the truth of the matter is that although Kenya are the real gurus in corruption, and in comparison, Tanzanian corruption is preschool staff. Nursery, we used to call it those days. Hata haijaingia class 1. It is very down there compared to Kenya. The truth is, there is still evil corruption in Tanzania. It has been there. And the tragedy of things in nchi jirani is that this corruption and partisan interests have crept into the National Security Council, or the Security Council of Tanzania. And therefore, what has been happening all these days is that the council was unable to reach a consensus on what to do next. Ilikuwa tu mvurutano with various interests, especially the corruption interests, very, very determined to retain the status quo, even when it was very clear that that is ndoto ya mchana. Okay, I still believe it is ndoto ya mchana. So you don't issue a statement when already kuna vurugu in the country's top security organ. That is the tragedy of nchi jirani, and that answers that question. But let's dive into this story right from the beginning, because the beginning of this trouble actually started when legend, founder of the nation, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, was still very much alive and influencing the politics of this country. And I believe that this very dramatic story I'm about to tell will start to answer that question, that mystery. Why? Why is it that one name keeps on cropping up over and over again when anybody is asked to explain where did this problem start? One name, not two, keeps on cropping up again and again. And of course, that is the name of former military man. Oh yes, I'm sure many did not know that. Kikwete served in the military. And of course, he got very heavily involved in military intelligence. Yeah, those who can read between the lines already know where I'm going with that. This military man, who is also a former president of the Muungano country. And I believe the best place to start that story is in Dodoma. On chilly July 22nd, 1995, Dodoma, Tanzania. What was going on was the CCM Party Congress. We call it in Kenya National Delegates Conference, which had gathered to elect the CCM candidate for president for the elections later that year. I really believe this is the best illustration of the political character of Mrisho Kikwete. In attendance at that party congress was legend, former president Julius Nyerere. He had retired, left the presidency 10 years earlier, and he had gone down in history as the first African president to leave power voluntarily. The custom in Africa those days was that the only way to leave the presidency was in a coffin. Nyerere had not only made history, but he truly walked away, and another government came in place and started practicing policies that were the very opposite of Nyerere's policies. The very first time in Tanzania, they started seeing something called matatus, what we call matatus in Kenya, private enterprise. Actually private enterprise on a large scale. This had never happened under Nyerere. Anyway, those are very long stories for another day. And of course we must be fully aware that the National Delegates Conference at the CCM, the Congress, was actually the real presidential election. Okay? Whoever was going to be selected there would automatically be president. Yes, there'd be an election after that, but the election was a mere formality. CCM was the party, yeah, with grassroots support, countrywide. And whoever was going to win this real election was going to take over from the second president of Tanzania, President Ali Hassan Mwinyi, who had taken over the helm from Nyerere and had supervised the most amazing, dramatic change in the economy of Tanzania that country had ever witnessed. In the first round of voting, the winner by far was Kikwete, and second was Benjamin Mkapa. However, Kikwete did not have the majority which the CCM constitution required to be declared the CCM candidate for the 1995 presidential elections. Okay? Now it is super fascinating that in the life of Nyerere, very few things surprised him. But this one surprised him. He could not believe what had just happened. And Nyerere intervened. Oh yes. Instead of preparing and then going into the second and final round of voting with the top two candidates, Jakaya Kikwete and Benjamin Mkapa, Nyerere called for a tea break. I'm telling you, this man was a political genius. Nyerere, achana na yetu. And during that alleged tea break, I'm not sure if Nyerere drank much tea. He knew which buttons to push. But at this juncture, I think it is important to note what Nyerere said about Kikwete. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the beautiful poetic language he used in fluent Kiswahili, okay, to describe Kikwete, and I've been unable to find it online. But the long and short of it is that he said Kikwete is still not ready for the presidency. He was not ready. That's the long and short of what he said. And when round two came, guess who won? Benjamin Mkapa, who became the third president of Tanzania. And the rest is history. What had happened at that CCM Congress that had made Kikwete suddenly so popular? Okay, it is pretty obvious that Bwana Jakaya Kikwete is a schemer par excellence. Ni mtu wa kupanga na kutenga. Sounds familiar? Oh yes. Political schemers, like schemers in real life, including somebody's wife somewhere, are very difficult to read. Normally, when you see them, they look all nice and beautiful and harmless. And by the time you discover the truth, it is usually way too late. Now this is super relevant to the current troubles in Tanzania. Oh, I can't emphasize that enough. It is very, 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 very relevant to what is unfolding in that country right now. Okay? Because the nature of life is that when you scheme and scheme and scheme and succeed, one day, finally, the whole thing blows up in your face and it is exposed to everybody to see what you did. That is really the long and short of it. And that is really the long and short of the crisis in Tanzania. Because of Kikwete's background, all these years, he remained super influential within the country's very powerful usalama wa taifa. Okay? Now I've said this before on this channel, that people make a mistake about Tanzania. Tanzania is not a democratic country. Tanzania is an old-style communist state pretending to be a multi-party democracy. That is the best description of that country. Allow me to give you a quick example to qualify this. The Majumba Kumi system, which was so enthusiastic about copying in Kenya, and I believe it was partially implemented, is actually a spy network. Okay? For instance, you're a foreigner and you move into Tanzania in a very remote area, and maybe you're a criminal and maybe you're not, and maybe you want to do harm to the country called Tanzania and maybe not. It doesn't matter. What will happen is that the Majumba Kumi system will immediately capture your details. How? the head of the Majumba Kumi, the head of the 10 households, is trained and constantly reminded, he immediately sends details of you to headquarters. And so you're there very relaxed, feeling very clever, but the country's intelligence is already on you. Anyway, let's stay on point. In that kind of environment, I just wanted to emphasize, the state security, state intelligence, usalama wa taifa, naturally, is a very powerful organ of government. And Kikwete, because he was a senior military officer, involved in military intelligence, and also in the country's intelligence, knew all the key people, was friendly to all the key people, remained very influential in the country's intelligence system. Okay? And I need to remind you, all this is very relevant to the mchafuko, the problems in nchi jirani, unfolding as we speak. And so legend patriot Mwalimu Julius Nyerere passed on about 4 years later, after that very dramatic Dodoma drama, political drama. And Mkapa did his 10 years. And in 2005, 10 years later, Jakaya Kikwete had no problem gaining the CCM nomination to be presidential candidate for the election of president of that country. And indeed he became the president. I think an article in the East African newspaper best describes the Kikwete presidency. The article was titled, "The Return of Charismatic Politics in Tanzania." Kikwete is very charismatic, almost as charismatic as founding father Julius Nyerere. And Tanzanians got very excited about this president. But in the background, there are some very disturbing things unfolding. Very disturbing. The country sank more and more into corruption. It is reported that a number of people became super rich overnight. Sounds familiar? I think so. Now, meanwhile, in usalama wa taifa, the country's intelligence, there are also some people who are very patriotic, who love their country and could see what was happening. And these people became more and more influential as Jakaya Kikwete's term came to an end. And these people came up with a candidate for the CCM nomination to fight corruption and to reverse what had happened during the Kikwete years. The name of that candidate, of course, was John Magufuli. A careful analysis of the politics of Tanzania in that day and age will quickly reveal to you that Magufuli was the candidate who came from nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. And super fascinating, he defeated the candidate handpicked by our friend Mrisho, Jakaya Kikwete. The smartness, maneuvering and everything and scheming that made that possible can be the subject of a super fascinating thesis. Oh yes. A news story won't quite cut it because you have to go deep. Kwa mizizi ndo uelewe vizuri what happened. Okay? But it was something quite dramatic, unprecedented, that made Magufuli president. But this caused a lot of political turmoil in Tanzania, the result of which we now see on the streets. Okay? That's the long and short of it. Now, of course, what Magufuli did is that he embarked immediately on dismantling a lot of Kikwete's networks. In the news, we saw major changes at the helm of the usalama wa taifa. Actually, what Magufuli was doing, he was trying to tame the influence of Kikwete in the intelligence community. And unfortunately, as I've said before on this channel, because everything has the advantages and disadvantages in this life. As I've said before, that move by Magufuli, in my opinion, cost him his life, because he got rid of some people who may have been able to save his life because of their understanding, especially of the international enemies of Magufuli, who finally did him in. Of course, not without some local assistance. And we can guess very quickly where they got their local assistance. And so when Magufuli suddenly passed on, there was a man behind the scenes, very busy working things, using the influence that they still had, to ensure that the next president of Tanzania would be able to repair their business and corruption networks. And the name of that person, of course, you know. The truth is that there were very few Tanzanians who believed that Madam Suluhu, the then vice president, would be able to lead this huge, colossal East African country. Very few Tanzanians believed that was possible. But then she was coached and groomed very quickly by the Usalama wa Taifa. And behind the scenes, her biggest supporter, of course, was former President Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete. The very sudden change of policy in the executive, most of it must be credited not to President Suluhu, but to Jakaya Kikwete, in my opinion. But meanwhile, what Kikwete would not see amongst the people of Tanzania he thought he knew very well were the massive changes taking place, courtesy of the World Wide Web and social media. It is instructive to note that in the election leading to Jakaya Kikwete's second term, I was in Tanzania at the time, so I was on the ground. He had a very big problem from Zanzibar. There was a very popular politician from that island, who was quickly building a very effective opposition against CCM. And the way that problem was dealt with was very clinical. What happened is that during a meeting of this very popular party at the time, the intelligence organized violence. And that was it. Tanzanians hate violence. Tanzanians will go to great lengths to avoid violence. That was true at that time. Okay? And I believe this is what stuck in Bwana Kikwete's mind and refused to move with the times and the changes and the reality kwa ground. I believe that's the crux of the problem here. Fast forward to the present, and so the very fatal mistake was made of stage managing an election where any credible opposition was removed, wiped out of the table, including jailing Tundu Lissu, and then the court releasing him 2 days to the general elections, etc., etc. That was when that very fatal mistake was made. And you see, in a build-up to this, there are so many things which had gone wrong in Tanzania. As greed set in, and the leaders ignored the people, very similar to the situation in Kenya. Life became harder for Tanzanians. Tanzanians felt that the government was not listening to them. The wananchi felt that their leaders lived somewhere else, completely oblivious of what things were on ground, what the people were facing. All this was building up. And the result is the explosion we saw in that country when the elections were called at the end of October. Just the other day. To cut to the chase, the real war going on in Tanzania right now is between the people who have become super rich from corruption and the people who are patriotic, they love their country, and they want a better Tanzania. And I'm talking about those in top leadership and influential positions. And that neatly explains the very strong disagreements in the Security Council that has placed the country in limbo, even as the protests escalate countrywide. In my humble opinion, Kikwetenomics, if I could call it that, is not sustainable right now, because the people of Tanzania, wananchi wa Tanzania, are very determined for change. You will have noticed that some prominent businesses were burnt to ashes. Don't you find that interesting? This information, at least some of this information we've been discussing today, is available to the public in the grassroots. And obviously, they're not happy. Remember, when they were burning down these businesses, they were saying something very interesting. Hii ni pesa yetu. This is our money. What do you think that means? They know what has been going on. And therefore, it will be very difficult for the current structure and networks of business close to government in Tanzania to remain intact. It will be very difficult. But we wait to see what will unfold next. I hope on my show today, it has become much clearer what the crux of the problem is. Of course, there are the many political problems like the Zanzibar issue, which many people have shared online. But all those are peripheral issues. I believe I've hit the nail on the head. The main problem that has caused this chaos is what we have discussed here today. But of course, as usual, I'll keep you informed of every tiny development in Inchi Jirani. Now, before I go, I want to play you a brief clip from my very latest highly sensitive special report. Listen in. I'll be back. It was executed by introducing two specially designed pills in a normal pill box, where the patient is supposed to take one pill per day. Just two rogue pills were introduced. And we know there are two because one was found and it was assumed the other one was taken because the symptoms and everything that happened, what his dead body was telling experts, this is exactly what he took that ended his life. Now, the usual dosage for ephedrine is 12.5 milligrams, 25 milligrams tops every 4 hours. Now, these killer pills were 1,000 milligrams. Now, remember, we're talking about assassinations where the start date and the date where it finally happens are very far apart. So in this particular instance, we do not know. Anyway, you can get this super fascinating information. Pop in your inbox. You can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 3,999, you can get this very revealing, highly sensitive special report that lays bare everything about our departed late hero of the country, patriot, Raila Amolo Odinga. Okay, a lot of information, I assure you, in this special report will shock you to your bones. Now, of course, if you're able to, the best option here is to go for the golden key. And this has to be the last opportunity for you to get the valuable golden key. That will give you everything Kumekucha now and in future, including this highly sensitive special report. And everything past, present, and future at no cost. And this golden key special offer is forever. It's a permanent golden key. It's not annual. It will not last a certain time and then run out. No, it is permanent. and therefore this is a great deal. Take advantage of this opportunity while it lasts. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.